Pick-me's are the mothers of the men who troll your comment sections. That's why their mothers aren't embarrassed by
Also, in fact, pick-me mothers model the behavior for these men to understand how you should not pick a woman. These men are in fact conditioned to repel and never pick women that are like that. If his mother was a pick-me, dealing with a pick-me is going to trigger him. In fact, he'll gravitate towards a pick-me and keep her there, right? Like kind of like that side piece, or, you know, those women that just be there and they just never get picked. Those men will do that. They perpetuate that relationship that they had, that something borderline incestuous. These mothers that played pick me and model the behavior for their sons to never pick them actually gravitate towards women that are just like that. And they also never pick them, because why would you want to do that if that created the trauma? You know what I mean? That's not healthy. But these men are not aware of that. But you women that want to be picked, just know that you're basically enabling the trauma and that karmic loop, that you're enabling those behaviors of those men. So to be a pick me is never quite safe at all. All it takes is for you to like attract a man with mommy issues. And if he gravitates towards a pick-me, I promise you, he has mommy issues. Men with mommy issues tend to have these tendencies to like women that are like their mothers, and their mothers are pick-me's. Their mothers was the initial pick-me. That's why they kind of talk about these pick-me behaviors. They idolize it, kind of like how they idolize their mothers. But who wants to date their mother? Are they ever quite happy with their mother? They'll want a woman like their mother, but never really treat them well. You guys see that, no? Are we in the same reality here? Also, the reason why pick-me mothers enable those behaviors of that trolling behavior, because pick-me mothers were permissive parents. These were the moms that couldn't really say no to their son. These were the moms that were like boy moms. These were the moms that also neglected their sons, that expected their sons to kind of like gallivant and frolic and do all these things. These are the women that coddled them to play. These were the women that didn't really raise them. They loved them though. And all the love did was enable them to be led to their own demise. And how it shows up is not being able to get like a higher education or hold on a good job, lack of career strives, not able to kind of like be fit on a developmental level as their female peer. Let's think about that. But yet they want to pick me woman. A lot of them are not even fit to even pick a woman that they can actually maintain. Not the one that they truly want though. Guys, this is such a sad world. Why? I don't understand. Why are we still doing this? Like, why are we even having?
is that they've been gaslit so bad that they think they're the narcissist.
Oh my God. Can I say something? I'm gonna say it anyway. But check this out, right? By the way, hello, Lady Venus Ferosi here. By the way, I am a licensed clinician. Y'all know what I do, but let me get into what I also do. What I know for sure is what's so common is I've had patients and clients come into a session with this paranoia, wondering if they're a narcissist. I'm talking about people coming in with legitimate concerns that they're a narcissist. I need you to understand that narcissists don't really carry that type of insight. Narcissists are too busy being narcissists to even question if they're being a narcissist. However, for anyone that has experienced narcissistic abuse, you will have some type of narcissistic trait. Like say, for example, let's think about anyone that was raised with a narcissistic parent. You yourself probably have some type of reactive trauma or some type of reactive response to some type of narcissistic behavior. So let's say in the future, you end up dealing with someone that isn't a narcissist, but they might have done something that reminds you of your narcissistic parent. You yourself can respond like the narcissistic parent to prevent the abuse. Now, what I love so much is that, especially men, check this out, right? Ladies, listen to me, because as much as people are talking about they're not seeing male clients, narcissistic clients, BPD clients, and clients with high mental illness or more severe mental illness, they're not for the weak. You have to have a certain level of expertise to be able to really deal with these clients. And you know what? They deserve help too. Dealing with a client that's narcissistic or dealing with a client with borderline personality disorder, it's almost just as difficult as dealing with a schizophrenic patient. Someone that has some type of psychosis attached to their mental illness. Just remember I said that. Anyway, back to what I was saying. So common. I've had men come into therapy, and one of the main concerns that they'll have is whether or not they're a narcissist. They'll come in and often self-report that people would see them as maybe a narcissist, and then we would talk about some of the behaviors that might have come up that can make someone see them as a narcissist. But I'd often tell them, hey, just by you having that mentality and concern around you possibly being a narcissist, lets me know that you probably aren't. But if people are reporting that you come off as narcissistic, we need to assess some of the behaviors that you're probably carrying that no longer serves you. And that is usually a form of traumatic response. Also, narcissistic personality disorder or narcissism tends to be comorbid with some other form of personality disorder. People with borderline personality disorder often have very narcissistic traits. Furthermore, people that had a narcissistic parent are more at risk for having borderline personality disorder. Look, guys, all I know is this is a real thing, but let's talk about this. Is there anyone out there that might have been gaslit so much that they swore that they were the narcissist? So someone asked, what if you have an anxious avoidance attachment style? And they've admitted, I had different styles with different men. Okay, let's get into that. So what I've noticed, let's say, for example, you were a woman that was raised with both your mom and your dad. Let's say you have a little bit of both mommy and daddy issues. Let's say simultaneously, you also have the anxious avoidant attachment styles. What I find so often is women in particular, they will often date men that remind them of their mother, and they will also date men that remind them of their dad. And this is so interesting because so often people will have like an avoidant attachment style and find themselves in this pattern where they'll date people that are anxious that will cause them to run, and then they'll bump into someone who now almost makes their attachment style change. Like, say, for example, maybe you're avoidant and then you date someone who is also avoidant, right? Then all of a sudden it triggers your anxious attachment style, or it causes you to develop an anxious attachment style. And what that would start to look like is technically being avoidant or never needing to chase a man. And all of a sudden you find yourself like plucking your edges, wondering where the fuck he's at. Why hasn't he texted me back? And mind you, this is probably new behaviors for you, right? And depending on how you're able to navigate that, you know, I'll usually see women might end up perpetuating the same pattern by getting sucked into something that triggers an anxious attachment style in them. And some women that cannot really navigate that, they'll cease dating men that have an avoidant attachment style because they don't like feeling anxious. And usually avoidant men will trigger their anxious attachment style. So some women will instead, because they prefer to reside on the more avoidant side, they'll date men that tend to chase them. Or even being avoidant and dating men that have more of an anxious attachment style kind of causes them to become a bit more secure and lean into the dynamic. It's almost like it's a preference thing, and depending on where your mommy or your daddy issues comes into play. So someone asked, what about when he points out other people who accepted that behavior in the past? It's annoying. Yes, but I'm just going to let you know, because I tend to look at these things very objectively, and I tend to see all behaviors as almost like something rooted from childhood. When you're a child, you have a lot of behaviors, right? When sometimes you don't outgrow these behaviors and these responses to certain things, right? If someone does not address it or it's not clipped in childhood, technically these behaviors don't go away. They just transform into more adult-like versions of those behaviors. And a lot of the times, people cannot handle an adult that's behaving technically like a child. People can't handle that, right? And oftentimes, men will not be aware of their power, and it's like they'll struggle with someone managing up if they're the so-called leader. They'll struggle with being receptive to feedback. It's them wanting to be the boss, but have a problem being checked. Like, there's something off about that. And the only people that ever really struggle with being checked or someone managing up, right? Because even in a leadership position, someone has to be comfortable with managing up or being able to give feedback to their boss. Simultaneously, the leader needs to be able to be receptive to whoever is giving them feedback. Now imagine having these people claiming to be leaders and they can't take feedback from the people that they want to follow them. So these people that would tend to go into situations and expect to be centered as the leader and be given all this power. However, they cannot change their behavior to better lead this dynamic. So you'll often have a man that, let's say extreme cases, it's a narcissist. And what a narcissist is basically an adult child that still has this fixed delusion or this mindset that the world revolves around them. A child that cannot accept decisions, right? That behavior in adulthood looks like a man that struggles with accepting no, struggles with a man that cannot take feedback. That is a man that cannot take feedback. He struggles with it. He is conflict avoidant. And that right there is why many people have accepted his behaviors in the past. You can't check an adult man, right? You cannot. If a man is resistant to getting feedback, you're going to have to get away because it's only going to result in your abuse. When you're an adult and a child struggles with accepting feedback and decisions, right? They might throw a tantrum, but they're a baby. It's no harm. Now imagine an adult responding like that to your feedback. You have to run. So I say this all to say, these men that tend to say, well, someone accepted this in the past, can you go tell them to go and find that person again, okay? And it's so funny that they'll point out, oh, well, this person accepted this in the past. It's the fact that you're not with them right now. That's the problem. It's the fact that he's not with that person. And the only person that might be tolerant of that is his mama. Tell him to go find his mother. Return him to sender, please. Let's talk about women with daddy issues and the anxious attachment style. Let me give you a few example scenarios of women that may have daddy issues or may have experienced their father in childhood that led to them choosing partners that made them feel the same way. And that right there, that trigger usually plays out to let you guys know, hey, this right here is indicative of having daddy issues. Now, if you have the anxious attachment style, here's a way to know if you have the anxious attachment style and daddy issues, or your anxious attachment style occurred as a result of having issues from your father. Now, usually the dynamic between a daughter and a father, or in which the daughter ends up with an anxious attachment style, it's usually created by a father that was emotionally unavailable, or a father that would often gaslight you. Those fathers that made you question whether he was going to ever really show up. Those fathers that made promises and literally fed you, I don't want to say lies, but they often told you what they were going to do. They would call and say, oh, I'm going to be there in an hour, I'm going to be there in 2 hours, or they would call the last minute and say, I'm not going to make it today. Those women that had the father that was there, but almost not really there, often created this anxiously preoccupied child. Mix that with a child that was parentified. What's so common between the anxious attachment style and the daddy issues is those women were often parentified. It's being worried about men that are not worried about you. But somehow you're clinging onto this dynamic and you're seeking validation, emotional security from someone that will never have that available. The fact that he makes you feel like your father, chances are you'll never probably feel secure with him. Yes, people can change, but if this man is not aware of the ways in which he show up like your father, and he can't change because he's not aware of that or the sensitivity to it, you'll have to leave him. One time, I was meeting with a client, and he would say things like, "Oh, she claims that I remind her of her father," and mind you, her father's not really a good person. So I was really offended. That's what the guy said. He was offended that she felt like he was like her father. And he was just like, I'm nothing like the father. And technically he wasn't. But when you look at the behaviors on paper, the ways in which he was not able to show up, it was the same ways in which the father was not able to show up. And the entire time, him and the father were both emotionally unavailable and not communicating why they were not able to show up. And mind you, if this is your partner, you're supposed to express that. But people that are anxiously preoccupied would spend a lot of time never knowing. So that's what often comes up. So let's talk about the presentation of women with daddy issues and the avoidant attachment style. This is very common for those women that operate from a very independent place. A A lot of people tend to think that a woman will have daddy issues if her father wasn't there. But what many people don't speak about are the women with, yes, daddy issues, even when their father is there. So what will often create an avoidant attachment style is, I don't want to say emotional neglect, but you learn to not feel safe. You tend to either lean out of situations where in which you prefer to handle things on your own. Women with avoidant attachment style tend to turn internally or lean out of situations to resolve their emotional issues. These women can often attract men with the anxious attachment style or those that are anxiously preoccupied. So it'll create this dynamic where they'll be in situations running from people. Usually avoidants can find themselves in situations pulling away from people that are pulling at them. Long story short, avoidant attachment style can make you present as emotionally unavailable. A lot of times people that are emotionally unavailable for whatever the reasons, they tend to pull away whenever things get rough. And as you know, no one's perfect, so we're going to go through ups and downs. But those that are avoidant, they'll spend a lot of time often trying to escape, lean out of situations, pull away. These are the women that will literally block you and disappear, okay? You get one chance with them, okay? Women with avoidant attachment style and daddy issues, how they often present is emotionally unavailable. These women, depending on the severity of the disconnect from the father, they can truly walk away from male dysfunctional situations and not care. However, the woman with daddy issues, where in which the father was there but emotionally unavailable, they can often find themselves in situations clinging to it, but kind of passively hanging on. But it's almost like they don't have the full security that they want, where it's the men being emotionally available. So they'll attract men that are emotionally unavailable, which will also perpetuate their emotionally unavailableness. And just because you had a father that was there does not mean that you're immune to daddy issues. The worst kind of situations is when their parents were there but were not doing well. You pretty much not only have to learn what's good, but you have to unlearn what they've taught you. Women with daddy issues and avoidant attachment style, you can often question if they actually like you. They struggle with reciprocating romance, and they can also repel that. Sometimes they can even repel men that are truly providing security and often reject them. If you're not careful, you can end up dealing with men with severe mommy issues, and how it presents itself is with the avoidant attachment style. Now, the thing with men who have mommy issues, they might not be aware of it, but they might be aware that they have an avoidant attachment style, which is basically this tendency to lean out of relationships or closeness. Avoidance says you prefer to work things through independently of others. Now, when mommy issues comes into play with someone that has an avoidance attachment style, you can often deal with men who will always choose to avoid closeness. Now, the trauma that comes up for men that have maternal wounds or mommy issues, these men were often sometimes parentified, right? These men often were sexualized. It's almost like emotionally incestuous. It's that dynamic where the narcissistic mother, for example, tends to parentify or treat the son as if it's her boyfriend. Now, these men can be very uncomfortable with closeness, but at the same time will give you boyfriend treatment. Now, when you as a woman, right, is seeing the way in which he's engaging, giving you boyfriend treatment, but avoiding the core things that make a situation secure, which is closeness, when they avoid that and you try to directly address them about it, you can trigger them. Also, men with mommy issues, they can have some form of emotional arrested development. They can often tend to gravitate towards women that are more emotionally mature. These women would have the resilience to be able to address these things, because obviously someone that's more mature emotionally is also psychologically more mature. So they can see these men with these behaviors and address it. Now, men with mommy issues that struggle with, well, technically do tend to struggle with female authority. So a lot of these issues that they tend to deal with is dealing with women that are more mature, obviously, because that's what they need. That's how the dynamic is being maintained. And these women will try to help them, but they'll be resistant. Also, I just want to add, men with mommy issues that tend to be very okay with friends with benefits. They tend to drag you along in situationships or find themselves in situationships. Sometimes they'll even find themselves in relationships in which they're just heavily attached to the person and they can't seem to get away, but they're still giving boyfriend treatment while being in complete denial that this is a real situation. It's almost like the dynamic or relationships tends to bring them back to that emotionally incestuous place. So seeing a man give you boyfriend treatment, but for some reason don't want to build a foundation, you have to just consider if he's still seeing you like his mom. Is the dynamic reminding him of when he was a kid and he was with his mom like that?
I married into an enmeshed family. I had no idea what an enmeshed family was, and I had no idea.
Let's talk about what this looks like in practicality. So often I would have couples come into therapy, or I've, had patients or clients in therapy sessions, and they would make complaints, but the complaints they don't realize is just a realization of them being in an enmeshed family. And what this would look like is being a part of a dynamic in which your partner is heavily involved with their family. Many people would see this as a positive thing, but however, when you and your partner is trying to build your own family, you'd realize that the influence of their external family is having so much say into your own family, but whatever dynamic you're trying to create with them. So let me give you an example of this. Think about a time in which you and your partner were making plans, and then your plans has to be on halt for the sake of putting their family first. Maybe you think about your own dinners, your own events you would like to plan with your partner, maybe a vacation, and maybe your partner is not going to be available because they have a family vacation with their parents and their extended family. So now the plans that you have between you and your partner has to be postponed. Or let's think about the ways in which you might be asked to do things that you're not comfortable with, like show up for family events that you're not quite comfortable with people, and you're forced to show up just to mingle. It's almost like having these standards or expectations for you to show up for your partner's family in a way in which you have no exposure with. Also, this can be a shock, a cultural shock within a family dynamic to women that did not grow up in a large family or an enmeshed family. If you were a woman that, your family, you didn't have a big family and maybe weren't too involved with extended cousins, aunts, and whatever have you, marrying someone or being with someone that has a big family or operate or heavily involved with their extended family can become overwhelming or feel overwhelming for you. Also, it can come with feeling like you have to share your attention and time with the extended family of your partner. It's always feeling like second to their family. Also, it's almost experiencing the trauma that their family caused them, and now you're experiencing that same trauma. It's almost like you marry into a dynamic in which whatever your partner experienced, including the trauma, you now get to experience that firsthand. So let me know your experiences. Have you gone through this? You know how narcissistic one has to be? Narcissistic in a way in which you're truly delusional. One has to be in a deeply deranged place to make it very clear to someone that they don't want a relationship, but when that person chooses to date other people, you get upset. I'm talking about getting upset that this person is choosing to be with someone else after you've made it very clear to them that you don't want anything more. I've spoken to narcissists, so I'm a clinician, by the way, and I've spoken with narcissists, and their mentality is truly that they feel as though no one else should be able to access the woman that they possess. Also, these men truly feel as though the woman belongs to them. They perceive the woman as property. So even though they are not in a committed relationship with this woman, no strings attached, there's nothing going on. He just have this, the narcissist just has this attachment to something that doesn't really belong to them, but where their brain is parked in that delusional space, they truly believe otherwise. And then what they'll do is gaslight you, or they'll get upset and, point out all these examples or things that they do for you to say, hey, you belong to me. But if they can point out all these things to say, hey, you belong to me and no one else should be able to access you, why can't you give it a title? Why can they not give it a title? These things often come up in the form of situationships, okay? Sometimes you're in a situationship, but also in a narcissistic imaginationship. The narcissist, in their imagination, they feel as though that they own you. And mind you, if they own you, that's why you're looking for the title around that level of commitment. But when you bring it up, it's almost like, look, all you need to do is get out. That is a get out situation, baby. Many Black women go through this in particular. And it is the shackles of which these men are in mentally that they tend to encourage you to participate in that deranged place that they're operating in. Y'all parents used to do this shit to y'all too. Those protective dads as well. It is being around men that possess you, that feel as though they own you, but never quite protect you. They don't want you to go nowhere else though, but they often find all the things in the world to say, hey, this is why I cannot commit to you. This is why I don't want you. But let you go somewhere else though, where someone actually does. I want to make something very simple for you ladies that has this tendency to like men who don't like you. In general, people or women that grew up in a household where they saw or they rarely saw their mom being loved. If you're a woman that come from a generation of women that were in relationships with very misogynistic or patriarchal men, if you grew up never seeing your mom loved, if you grew up without a father or, your mom having a partner that would be able to display behaviors that says she is loved, chances are you don't know what it looks like for a woman to be loved. Also, if you grew up seeing your mom being mistreated, right, but have these attachments to people that mistreat her, in adulthood, you tend to develop this tendency to like people that don't like you. And when you start to, and when they start to like you, you no longer like them. It's the fact that what you learned about love is disinterest. You grew up seeing women having attachment to men that rarely love them. So when we tell you women to choose better, it's really about choosing men that can really love you. So society will, chastise men for being submissive. But it's the fact that unless you get a man that's like submissive to you or really soft with you, or like, what they call it? Like they like to call the good guys, the men that are actually equipped to love you and also be able to teach your kids how to receive and give love. And that's what men really need in particular. Like as a woman, it's very important for you to find a partner, especially if you have a son that can display behaviors of what it means to love a woman. Many men, especially within the Black community or any culture where the men and the partnerships, like there's a lot of misogyny there, these women rarely get the opportunity to understand what it looks like to receive love. But what we'll notice is in the same culture, these men will expect you to teach them how to treat you, which is also why I encourage women to date, outside of their race, because there is a deficit of love within the Black community, and it's very obvious that the men need you to teach them how to treat you. You see what I'm saying? And also, if they don't have fathers and you can't control the fathers and they keep telling you to choose better, at this point, you have to put yourself in situations in order to learn how to be treated better. It's the fact that a lot of these men won't do well. They're not doing well within their own community, but they'll go someplace else for a woman to save them and fix them up a bit. And maybe those women are in a position. You see what I'm saying? That's over in other cultures, maybe those women are receiving love more. But you Black women, you have to put yourself in that position to learn better. But in general, you women need to learn what love looks like in action. So I've come to the realization that I remind them of the version of their mom that she was never able to become. Why? Because she was busy raising him. I remind them of the version of their mom that they idolize, the version of their mom that never got a chance to fully become the woman that she wanted to be because she had to play mommy and daddy. And then I, on one hand, thought to myself, how does a person like me, raised in a two-parent household, tend to attract men that have mommy issues and were raised in a single-parent household? You know, I can attract lots of people, but every now and then I'll attract that type of archetype of a guy. And I'm like, what does that say about me? What is it about me? So I'm having this discussion with my sister, and I said, how the hell is this a thing? And I was raised in a two-parent household. And then it occurred to me, right? It's me being the oldest one, and we all know that the first one tends to be given mommy 2.0. And then I realized it's being raised like a single mom in a two-parent household. That'll do it. No wonder they're attracted to me. I remind them of their single mama, the one that the mama never got a chance to become. And I'm over here just basking in the glory of being just that. And it's the fact that I have the audacity to complain about that too. And let's get into the fact that how did I manage to even just be given single mom in a two-parent household? It's giving parentified child. Yes, these are the issues I must work out because I cannot.